My absolute great pleasure to welcome one of my favourite locals in Australia. And Australia being such a ginormous country, when I say local, that means that she's covering huge populations, sitting at about 26 million, and really addressing something very important: gender equity. We're looking not at the principle of how can we be equal, how can we get the same, but how can we start in the same place? How do we access, acknowledge, and support each other? And how do we congregate together? It's my pleasure today to welcome Lisa Sweeney, who is the CEO of Business in Heels. She is a classic female entrepreneur, innovator with 25 years experience in retail. She has a warmth and a courage about her that's both enticing and invigorating, and she brings so much into this room. It is my absolute great pleasure to welcome one of my favourite locals in Australia. And Australia being such a ginormous country, when I say local, that means that she's covering huge populations, sitting at about 26 million, and really addressing something very important: gender equity. We're looking not at the principle of how can we be equal, how can we get the same, but how can we start in the same place? How do we access, acknowledge, and support each other? And how do we congregate together? It's my pleasure today to welcome Lisa Sweeney, who is the CEO of Business in Heels. She is a classic female entrepreneur, innovator with 25 years experience in retail. She has a warmth and a courage about her that's both enticing and invigorating. And she brings so much into this room in terms of both her experience and her commitment. She's not only one of the people that you could turn to in business, but if you're looking to set your career path as a young woman, then you need to know Business in Heels. Lisa, so welcome today.
Thank you so much, Graziella. What a lovely way to come.
Well, you're an absolute accelerant, I've got to say. When we talk about a positive virus, I think about you. So one of my favorite sayings is a positive virus, and you're an absolute accelerant to female populations with such an amazing background. Can we just share a little bit of your background from your perspective, both in retail and, a little bit around your inspiration to go out there and to launch something for women? So give us a little bit about you.
Thank you. Look, I guess initially my interest in women started off back in my 20s when I was in an amazing role where I was a female buyer. And for many people, you're shopping for other people and creating trends. And it was a really exciting time. But at that stage, I was pretty naive and I thought everyone was equal, that we were all having a wonderful time. And I had gone over to China, and I was in a factory out the back of China trying to buy printed leggings. And we were sitting around having conversation with the people that were running the factory, and I was learning more and more about China. It was very early on in China's days, and so most people were still, pretty, I want to say oppressed, but, fairly poverty was fairly high. And they were discussing with me the one-child policy. And it was the first time that I had ever come across this idea that girls weren't equal. And not only were girls not equal, but they were actually being chosen against. So for the Chinese people at that stage, they had to make a choice between whether they'd have a boy child or a girl child, and which one would provide for them for the future. And so they were actively choosing to abandon girl children because they didn't think that they would be able to support them in their old age. And it just had never occurred to me. I was so shocked. And I came back and, I sort of thought, Australia was very equal. But of course, the more you look around with a new lens, the more I found. And then I realized that women, were very much not equal. And I was being quite naive. And I guess I didn't really know where that was going to take me. And over time, I ended up adopting my daughter from China. And, then, when I finally got the chance to step out of my retail career and set up a business, I knew I wanted to do something which would have a purpose. And so here I am working on gender equality.
It's really fascinating. I'm Asian born, and I'm, really pro everything that talks about our world as one people. We both come from having worked in, sectors that can be considered, to be non-definitively for women. I came from forensics. You've come in from, both retail, but gone into finance and really sort of held a lot around the finance industry. And I think that's where, we collided together. And I think it's really unusual for us in this world to stop and recognize some of those things. And sometimes we see it in a culture that's not our own, that forces us to go back and look at our own culture and say, well, hang on a minute, it's actually here as well, and we might not realize that in our own communities where we can have blinkers, that it's not all about stepping onto the same ladder, the same rung, the same way. So in listening to your story, it's fascinating because for me, the opposite was true. It was kind of like coming to Australia and kind of going, oh, hang on a minute, and then I sort of looked back at my own cultures and went, well, yeah, there's some great things that we do, but there's great things that we need to do better. So seeking improvement and wanting to ensure that we educate, we empower, we build champions across, every culture, across every gender, because, that one world, that wonderful place where we're judged not by who we are, skin, gender, but just our skill base. It's a little bit elusive. So your early influences and those specific experiences, obviously those memories in your life shaped your vision for empowering women in business. If I said to you then, if you looked at the impact stories, can you share an example of a particular woman or group of women whose lives were transformed through anything that inspired you to begin Business in Heels? Because Business in Heels is kind of cool. You think about business and you kind of think, yeah, that's us, that's who we are, striking the way around. What inspired you to start it? And then perhaps also what perhaps propelled the beginning and what makes you keep going? Is there any positive story in there of women who've really honestly made it through Business in Heels that's just said to you, I know why I'm doing this?
Yeah, if I think about it, Graziella, it's to do with, why did we start it? We wanted to create a vision, an opportunity where everybody was equal in the long run. And it seems like potentially there's so far to go. And yet when we take little steps and we work with people individually, we find that we can make a huge difference. So Business in Heels has a number of different programs that we run, a lot around mentoring and some particularly where we do it to help women start up and grow businesses. And there were a couple of amazing stories that, we've had many stories, but one that came to mind was a woman who came to me and she was, I just absolutely in tears. She was ready to sell the business. She was so frustrated. She'd not made a profit in 8 years, and it turned out to be, it's a really cool vegan business. And we sat down and we worked through some really fundamental arithmetic and various things, and I gave her some strategies to work on it. And over the course of 6 months, she worked through that, and she came back to me just after Christmas and said she'd made her first profit in 8 years. And she wasn't going to sell the business anymore. She was loving it so much, and she knew she could take control of it. And she's continued to go on and grow that business. And we see this often when we're working individually with business owners. I mean, one just the other day said to me, and she didn't have a clue about her pricing. And so she was tentative when she put quotes out, and she's like, I pitched for a brewery the other day to do my services, and I knew what my quote was, and I went out there and I was confident and I nailed it, and I got the business. And she said, if I didn't have those tools, if we hadn't have had that discussion about pricing and how I would deserve to, make money, which is often a problem we have with women. And she was just so strong in what she wanted, and it was a really great thing to see.
That was a really interesting throwaway statement. I'm not going to really run away from that. Women finding it difficult to want to make money, or perhaps feeling a bit guilty about taking money for what they do. We had a little bit of a chit chat about this, I think, when we first met, and we were so fortunate because we met through NAB. So we'll give you a bit of a plug, National Bank of Australia, through Annika Taylor and through one of my favorite people, Kylie Smith. Thinking, back then when I sort of came back to Australia and I was looking at things, and I've trained in finance, and we had that little chat about, making money and big numbers, how comfortable are women making those big numbers. Obviously, there's a vision for a lot of women when they start business, but there's naturally that kind of nurturing or wanting to do or give back. And I know that we spoke about that sense of guilt, that sometimes women can have that sense of guilt. And that was in a brief in passing. I remember that when we first met. And for me, I see that in our clients. Do you strike that in some of the women that work with you? Quite often their buttons get pushed and they're forced into a position of giving away things as opposed to charging for them?
Absolutely. We work with so many people, and I don't think there's been one that we haven't helped put her prices up. And this is not to, like rape and pillage. This is just to earn a decent living. And people have skills and they deserve to be paid for them. Even in a corporate setting, how many women will find out, and a number of them do as managers, that some of their subordinates earn more money than they do, which is a surprise, because surely management get that they'll work it out sooner or later, or they've just been promoted into the CEO role and they discover that the previous CEO earned 30% more than they did. And the board's busy justifying it because of the experience level, and yet the person's there doing the job. So we come across it a lot.
It's a really tough kind of position to be in, and I know those throwaway statements that we've all had, and I try not to kind of dwell on them too much, but even just the questions around finance for women, do you have a de facto? Are you on your own? Do you have dependents? And somehow it makes you almost feel like the weaker side of anything. And you have running through your head, I wonder if men get asked those questions. Do you have dependents? And somehow do they get looked at the same way? Because it's kind of a rough tapestry, especially since there is actually a larger percentage of our population who are parenting on their own and they happen to be women. So, and quite a few of them are businesswomen. So Business in Heels then provides that safe haven for women like that. What for you, contributed to this vision, and was that a contributor as well? And in terms of this, how has that evolved? Do you feel that there is a change in the tapestry of how women are evolving in business? How is Business in Heels adapting to that? Did the vision have to change, or is it just more of what you knew had to happen?
Well, many questions in amongst all that. I think we started off thinking that safety was quite important. And it's interesting, when we first started, the word safe kept coming up. It was a safe place to have conversations, and people felt safe and included. And so it wasn't initially, we thought more energized, exciting, but for many people, that was something that they were really looking for. And I often find, when women want to have a good discussion, it's got to be, and it often covers everything from family and health all the way through to business. There's no way of disconnecting all that, because it's part of people's lives. So it's not like we're a business person, 1 second, and, not a wife, a mother, an aunt, a grandmother, whatever, in another second. So we work to provide that safe space. And when we originally started, it was very much about helping people get connected and putting them together. And when along the way, we realized lots of people were having great meetings, but actually not getting a lot out of it. And so we started introducing education and helping people understand how they could network up, how they could network for careers, how they could network to collaborate, how they could network to grow their businesses. But still, fundamentally, a lot of people had a lot of roadblocks. And it wasn't until we introduced mentoring into the equation that we were really able to work with people at some of the root causes. And often we've all got our own biases and where we started from. And, you were talking about your perspective coming into Australia, and I'm talking about my perspective going out of Australia. And, that comes with a lot of baggage. And a lot of people feel that they must clear their inbox before they do any networking, even though potentially the networking within an organisation might make their life easier, it might make them more productive. There's a lot of baggage we have around finance as well, women's relationship with money and, am I worthy to be paid more or less? And so part of the Business in Heels vision is the vision's always been big enough to allow us to go where we wanted to go. So we want to create an unlimited future for women. That's the vision. Right. And so as we've gone along, we've added mentoring, and we do mentor mornings in lots of different locations. And that's all about giving women access to, just an hour of mentoring. 50% of women get no access, and we just want to make it accessible. And so many women around the country have stepped up that want to be part of that, where they just love giving an hour of their time to be able to sit with someone, and they all find that it's so, everyone walks away uplifted because you always get something out of the conversation, whether you feel like you've helped or whether you've learned something new or whether you've got a different perspective on things. It's just a wonderful situation to be in. So we added in the mentoring, and that has made a substantial difference. And then I guess the next part of the conversation is women helping women will only take us so far. And so we've felt in order to bring everybody into the conversation, we started the Gender Equity Awards. It was around one International Women's Day, and we were considering what we might do, and we decided that we'd had enough of the talk fest and then we actually wanted to do something that was a bit more practical. And wouldn't it be just great to know what all the good people out there were doing, and then we just tell everybody about it, and they would all then start copying one another, because why reinvent the wheel, and hopefully improving on things. And that's what we've seen people doing, which is really exciting. So, yes, it has continued to evolve over the 10 years we've been running it. So,
you've alluded to a couple of really important success stories around what you've been doing in Business in Heels. And I think it'd be really beneficial for the listeners to hear about really practical success stories they could relate to, and things that, there are certain events that perhaps they can also grab hold of and be part of right now, especially now because it's that funny time of year where we're thinking about this invisible finish line. And we almost mark the new year as, okay, right, let's clean sweep and start again. And it is an exhausting time. It can be a stressful time as much as it is a joyful time. So give me a little bit of what's the punchy success stories that you've seen lately, and where can people jump on and create their success story with you?
Sure. So, some of the great success stories have been around perseverance, authenticity. We see women today, just sharing more vulnerably the fact that they don't know everything. And I think the best leaders that we're seeing in the marketplace are those ones that are willing to, say, I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to persist and I'm willing to try. And some of the more interesting ones, you talk about success stories. So what is success? And I think the perspective on success is changing. So success used to be I climbed a ladder and I just got the next rung up and the next rung up. But that's not necessarily what everybody wants to do. And so we've seen a massive shift in that in the marketplace to people actually seeing success around, I actually want this experience in my life. I want my life to be this interesting, eclectic collection of experiences. And so, one woman had a desire to go and work and live in America and work for a big company, and she managed to nail that job. Another one wanted to, become the global marketing manager of a very large company, and she's actually been part of our mentoring program for the last 4 or 5 years, and she's now nailed that job after about 3 promotions. And you just, as I said, you're working with all these people all the time and hearing amazing different shifts. And so I guess for people, if they want to get involved with us and see what they can do, you can come along to Mentor Mornings. All of the dates for 2025 are up on the events site at Business in Heels. If people want to get involved as a member and get access to some mentoring, again, they simply need to go to the Business in Heels website. There's a huge amount of data and lots of great education. And so some of these things that we've been talking about, how did they get to become that promotion? Little free courses like Managing Up and Networking Up are on our website, so people can just jump on and take some time to work through that, maybe in the holidays, in their leisure. But you can put some of those plans in play. I think the biggest challenge, as Graziella was saying, we're heading to this invisible finish line, but people put a lot of pressure on themselves, and then they say, oh, I've got to have my, New Year's resolutions, and it's going to be this and that. And, you come up with this overwhelming list, and then you failed by week 2 January, and then you spend the next months or so beating yourself up. So if I can suggest one thing, is come up with maybe one thing that you'll do differently for the month of January, and make that a success, and then do February at the end of January, so that you don't feel like you've got this overwhelming load of things that you're trying to tick off.
Really interesting stuff, because one of the things I sort of let go of yesterday was a series of 10 tips around this time of year. And one of them was to change that cognitive dissonance, that real sense of, interruption that's going on, the argument that goes on inside yourself. And social comparisons are really big part of that argument. So a lot of people will hide away or become angry or not be able to relate to things. There's that horrible kind of word that, I heard you speak about, that sense of overwhelming failure that can come up. And I choose to keep that out of the cognitions and out of any of the, the self-talk or talk, because it is overwhelming, I think, to think about what you need to do. But that aspiration is so very necessary. So that leadership philosophy that comes from you, that's your heartbeat. What are the key components that you believe are the assets of a good leader, especially in this space? Two of my favorite values are courage and kindness. It takes courage to speak up. It takes courage to acknowledge. It takes courage to have the conversation. And then it takes kindness, a little bit of empathy to realize that you might be seeing things from your perspective, but that conversation that takes place can at times bear fruit of many things. What would be your top 3 or 4 leadership qualities that you see as so necessary in both this climate and environment for women?
Gee, I think you've probably nailed 2 of them. I certainly agree with you around courage and kindness. I think more than ever before, speaking up, particularly if anyone's, starting to doing business in America at the moment, having courage of your convictions or to be able to follow things through. And I think kindness is so important, because we're such a diverse, we have such diverse workforces. We're such a diverse community. I was at the Vic Market last night looking at 50 different cuisines and just appreciating how lucky are we to be surrounded by so many diverse cultures and embracing. I think one of the other leadership qualities that I love is curiosity. With genuine interest of, around different people and different cultures and the way business is evolving and different things. And I think that will, that curiosity and willingness to venture into different places is part of it. Business is fast moving and we need to keep adapting and changing. So having that curiosity and desire, maybe adventurous spirit of, trying different things, because you're going to try and fail lots of times just to pick yourself up. And so maybe it's that, I don't know whether that's classed as resilience or whether it's classed as curiosity, but, it's about the Australian word of having a go and just seeing what happens.
Interesting one, having a go. I mean, I've thrown that out there a few times, and I love that you brought it up, because it's we're just going to have a go. We're going to give it a go. We're going to try this. We're not going to say we're going to ace it. We're going to try it and see what happens. For Win 5 in India, which is this big, hairy, audacious goal of 5 million women to be affected by our programs in the next 5 years. And so you look at it and you say, we're just having a go. We're not going to say it's ultimately there, but that's our goal. And already 75,000 women, you think, wow, that's only 2 months. But one of the big things I think that we do hold on to is fear. And fear in itself is a question. It's always an unanswered question. And so the dialogue, the conversation becomes really important. Supporting each other is very, very important. So that aspiration to break the stereotype and to know that you can be the future of something. And I think supporting other women, that's the wonderful part about Business in Heels. And I know we, shared common links through banking groups and finance sectors. And I know that Sheetal, who came over from Dubai, a really good friend of mine, who was related to another great friend of mine, Ahmed, over there, who said, look, I've got a friend coming to Australia. Can you help her? And immediately I said, yeah, sure. And then I threw her straight onto a stage in front of people and put her into a couple of panels. And it was like a birth by fire. Oh, my goodness. And I said, well, this is the way to be. To become known in a different environment. And obviously, I think that becomes so important. And you touched on culture. Now, being, a migrant from an Italian Maltese heritage, born in India myself, parents who are diplomats, living in 13 countries, coming to Australia at the grand old age of only, 4 or 5 years old, and learning a different environment, and then trying to establish, that who I was and my identity. I think that wonderful thing about Australia is our multinational heritage, but then it also is something that we don't at times do very well, because we have had racial tensions. We have had barriers there for women of different cultures, who have barriers within their own cultures. And it's so important to not judge. It's so important to use permission giving language. It's so important to be able to say, let me learn about you, and then to walk beside you, not with my expectations, but what are you comfortable with? It's that dialogue again. So much of that boils down to the dialogue. How do you support women in Business in Heels from that perspective?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think, again, it comes back, some of your own biases, whether you like it or not, but we show through. And I guess I often feel like I just have inadequate knowledge on many things. But we did a great scholarship program with a bunch of First Nations business owners that were women. And we just kept throwing questions to them of, how would you like to, how would you like us to discuss this? How can we refer this? And within that, we discovered even some tensions that were, historic between a couple of the attendees, which, again, we had to work with to support them to manage. And so I think sometimes it's just about being really, again, curious, but asking those questions, and embracing change once like there's some fantastic organizations around that are really embracing change. So, for example, I think, the hijab became part of corporate clothing for CBA at one stage. And I was just so impressed that they had rolled it out and made it, okay, because at that stage there was some racial tension, and customers had actually been making negative comments in store. And so just to be respectful. But one of the ones I heard the other day, which I love this is so cool, is the simple thing for organizations to say, okay, I don't care what your belief system is, but you've got 6 public holidays in a year. Pick the ones that you want that mean the most to you, and they're your public holidays for the year, right? So simple, and yet so powerful of, embracing different diversity.
That's actually really significant, because, learning and understanding that Christmas might be important to you if you're a Christian, but it won't be as important as other celebrations, when you're coming through cultures that look at their religion differently, and they have different religions that govern and guide them. So, and we have so many. So, interfaith is important. Culture is important. Uh, there are so many different stereotypes, and yet this world that we live in is now looking at how are we going to live in space. So I think it's fascinating because the United Nations has come out with space habitats, and I'm thinking, well, that's great. Let's get us off the planet and see how well we can go. So if I then close off with, that really important topic for us around resilience and life balance. You run a really busy organization, you're a mother yourself, but you're also, taking care of a number of other roles. And people that turn to you will turn to you, for many different reasons, because when you do put yourself out there as a leader, you become more accessible. And so that favorite kind of iceberg under the surface, there's so much going on. How do you keep balance? How do you stay balanced? What are your go-tos to make sure that you keep the wheels turning right?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, look, being comfortable with imbalance is part of life, I think. But for me, I live in a great location, so I'm very blessed. I live in the country, so I'm out of the hustle and bustle. And so just being at home is a relatively peaceful, and I can pick and choose how busy I choose to be. But I'm lucky because I can, go for a great walk, maybe ride a horse, whatever. And I always choose to do, some exercise, and I try and eat well in amongst everything else. And then I just love doing as much as I can do. And I guess that's the imbalance. But it's fun of it. I guess it's the fun of it. And so for me, catching up with people and having coffees, and it lights me up, and I learn new things, and I'm inspired to go and check other exciting new things. And so it's not overwhelming, and I have the means around me, I guess, to shut myself off when I need to.
Fantastic. So, there's some nice little tips that you've given us there, and I'm going to close off with a question for this time of year because I think it's so very important. It is a pressure time of year, and we do see a lot of pressure out there. And I'm asking everybody that I'm interviewing at the moment, what would be your best advice to both your client group and to anybody else that is heading up against both the social comparison pressures, the financial pressures, sense of loneliness or isolation, perhaps? What's your advice to them at this time of year to keep them in check and keep them in balance so that they can start and end the year really well?
Okay. I think to be, try and be happy within yourself, and think of something that you absolutely love to do and focus on that. I mean, the comparison thing, it's something I avoid looking at because everybody's an individual. We've all got our own unique things. There's always going to be somebody better than me at everything, different things, but nobody else is going to be me. And so if I'm going to live my life, I'm just going to do the best things I can. So just being happy to be, and finding some of that time. And, if any of your things that you're thinking about for, try to overachieve your goals, not be somebody else. Try and stretch yourself in the things that you want to learn and grow, but not because somebody else is doing, because you genuinely want to do it. And then it becomes, a genuine thing that you want to put time and effort into. And don't try and aspire to be somebody else, because you're probably the very best version of you anyway.
Fantastic. So you're definitely a source of inspiration. And I think that there are some, frontline quotes that you've given us in this podcast that we can definitely go forward with. And they are around that resilience, growth, inclusivity, supporting each other, the importance of balance, and the power of a network. I think, for me, that's again such a reminder that reaching out to organizations like yours and such as yours are really important, because this is where, it's even just being in the room with other people who feel like you, who are going through what you do. And the powerful message comes back from not only, the people around you, but amazing founders like you who've overcome barriers and who've got their own impact stories, but your vision is to support others. I can only thank you for today, and I certainly look forward to the next Business in Heels meetup. And if there are any things that you would like to say finally there in closing around where people can get a hold of and become part of Business in Heels, do let us know.
Sure. So if anybody wants to get involved or reach out to me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or have a look at the website www.businessinheels.com. We have lots of mentor mornings, leadership summits, the Gender Equity Awards, and exciting things planned for 2025. So I look forward to meeting some of you there.
Fantastic. Lisa Sweeney, it has been my absolute pleasure to spend some time with you today, and thank you for coming into the Daily Dose.
Well, thank you for having me, Graziella. It's been a blast.